What's up, guys? Welcome back to Savage Rounds with Xavier. Today we've got episode 25. We're breaking down UFC Fight Night Paris. This is the second time they've gone to Paris recently. They went last year with Gane headlining, but today, or this weekend, we've got Ciryl Gane versus Serghei Spivac and Manon Fiorot and the return of Rose Namajunas as the co-main event. Rose Namajunas coming up a weight class to 125, which is pretty interesting. A lot of new faces on this card. Let me count the debuters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 debuters. Another guy who had a stint in the UFC making his return after a few years. Another one who was in the UFC. Yeah, we've got a lot of guys making returns or their debut. This might be a little bit of a thinner card betting-wise for me. I've got a few money lines I like, but overall, this has been kind of a card with harder spots to fight or to find. So it'll be not as many bets from me this week, but I'll tell you about the few I've got already when we get to them. So I won't have as many betting ideas this time. But kicking off the card, we've got Xavier versus one of our debuters, Jacqueline Cavalcanti. Xavier, 39 years old, 6-5 record, 5'8", 72-inch reach, 2-3 in her last 5. Her last fight was a unanimous decision loss to Josiane Nunes in January of this year. On the other side, Jacqueline Cavalcanti, 26 years old, 5-1 record, 5'7". 5'7". There were no reach stats for her. She's 4-1 in her last 5. This is her debut, and her last fight was a unanimous decision victory over Melissa Cruden for the vacant women's bantamweight belt at LFA. This one, it feels pretty simple, I'd say. Xavier, she's a good striker. She's got solid power for the weight class, but she's 39 years old. She hasn't shown the ability to beat the best girls in the UFC so far. She's 6-5, and just the age really, I don't know. It's gonna be tough for her in this one, I think. Because really the boxing is the main part of her game, and like I said, she's got heavy hands, but it's really nothing else. She gets hit a lot too. Her movement's not the best. She's a bit slower. Cavalcanti, she's pretty well-rounded, I would say. She's really aggressive on the feet. She's got great hands, decent power for the weight class again. She throws really good kicks, and if she can get the fight to the ground, which she doesn't, she's not out there hunting to get the fight to the ground, but if it gets taken there, she's well-suited. On top, she's got some pretty strong ground and pound, and she's looking for the finish if it's on the ground. But this is one where it'll definitely stay on the feet, in my opinion. Like I said, Cavalcanti, she's serviceable on the ground, but she's not really looking for it to get there most of the time. And this is one where I don't think she'll need to. I think she's going to be much quicker. I think the kicks are going to help a lot. She's going to be able to really kick the front leg of Xavier. Her movement's great. I think it's going to be hard for Farron to find her with the bigger shots. And yeah, I just think the speed, the athleticism, it'll just be too much for Xavier. And I think this is a good matchup in Cavalcanti's debut for her to get a win under her belt. So I'm going with her. I won't have too many betting ideas this card. I've got a few locked in already that I'll tell you about, but the only one I'm kind of thinking for this one is maybe that under 2.5. I know it's plus money right now. I've seen a few people take it, and it seems good because obviously Xavier's got big power. We've seen Cavalcanti hurt before. I really don't see that happening, but the way I see it going under is Cavalcanti just being too much for Farron in the first 2 rounds and being able to get her out of there. So I may end up throwing a bit on that. But yeah, the pick is Cavalcanti. Next up, we've got, where is it? I was looking at my list. Farid Basharat versus Clayton Rodriguez. This is a matchup of great prospects. We were supposed to see Clayton Rodriguez not too long ago against Tatsuro Taira, but he wasn't able to make it to the cage, and we got a debuter in the end for Tatsuro Taira. 2 younger guys who are pretty well-rounded. I like this fight a lot. It's going to be real exciting. Basharat, 26 years old, 10-0, 5'8", 71-inch reach, 5-0 in his last 5 with a win on Contender Series, and he is 1-0 in the UFC. His victory over Damon Blackshear, and that victory has aged pretty well so far. He's got 2 pretty good fights since then. And his last fight, like I said, was that Damon Blackshear unanimous decision victory. On the Clayton Rodriguez side, he's 27 years old, 8-2, 5'5", 67-inch reach, 4-1 in his last 5 with a win on Contender Series, and he's 1-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a round 1 KO TKO over Shannon Ross in February of this year. I like Clayton Rodriguez, but I think the overall game of Basharat is going to be too much for him. He's a really good striker. He's got a lot of power. He throws a lot of variety. But I think Farid Basharat is going to be able to use his distance management and movement really well in this fight. I think he's going to be able to kick Rodriguez's legs, kind of keep him at bay. He's got really fast, good boxing. I'd say he's the more technical striker out of the two. Definitely not as much power as Clayton, but I'd say he's the better striker. And I think he can take this fight to the ground. We've seen on the ground, Clayton Rodriguez had been reversed by CJ Vergara a couple times. He's good on the ground as well, but obviously that's not where he wants to be. And I think Basharat has good wrestling, and if he needs to, he can take this fight to the ground. But to be honest, I see this being another unanimous decision for Farid Basharat. I think unless Rodriguez can get in there and hurt Basharat, I think overall this will be a pretty straightforward fight for him, where he can kind of outpoint his way to a decision. This is one of those ones where I have it in a little 2-leg parlay. I like Basharat a lot. I do think he's going to win, so he's one of my more confident picks for this week for sure. But yeah, Basharat is the pick here for me. Next up, another debuter. We've got Nora Cornell versus Jocelyn Edwards. Cornell, 33 years old, 6-1, 5'7", no reach stats, 5-0 in her last 5, and this is her debut in the UFC. Her last fight was a really weird victory over Hasna Gabber in UAE Warriors this March. She got kicked in the leg. I don't know, she kind of just looked up and the ref was like, I'm cool, I don't want to do this anymore. Obviously it hurt her, but it was just a funny way for the fight to end. She just looked over at the ref and was like, nope, we're done here. But she'll be taking on UFC vet Jocelyn Edwards. She has the oddest UFC run. It feels like everybody bets against her every time, and it feels like she's lost more fights than she has, but she's 4-2 in the UFC, which is quite impressive. 27 years old, 13-4, 5'8", 70-inch reach, 3-2 in her last 5, and her last victory was a split decision over Lucy Pudilova in April of this year. That was a really close fight. I watched it back, and I do think Pudilova won the first 2 rounds. I don't know. It was an interesting decision for sure. But yeah, I just barely edged it out to Pudilova. I think this is either going to be a fight where Jocelyn Edwards makes this look really easy, or she's not going to be able to get anything off, and Cornell's able to get this to the ground every time. Cornell is, you could tell early on in her fights, she's a Muay Thai striker for sure, through and through. She throws all the spinning elbows and stuff. She has great clinch. Her knees in the clinch are really solid. She's real strong. But in a lot of her fights, she ends up taking the fight to the ground, which could end up being a problem for Jocelyn Edwards. The only thing that I see where I say it's either one way or the other, it's the takedowns. So Cornell, when she's going for these takedowns, she typically likes to get you in that clinch and push you up against the fence and drag you down. There are a couple times throughout the fights that I watched where she would actually shoot like a traditional single or double leg. I remember 2 off the top of my head, like, that actually worked. Most of the time the other ones were pushing her up against the fence and trying to drag them down that way. I think if she's trying to clinch up Jocelyn Edwards and drag her down that way, I think Jocelyn Edwards can have success in that clinch. She's got a decent clinch of her own. She's long, and I think that's a spot where she'll be able to separate. But if Nora has been drilling takedowns, knowing Jocelyn Edwards isn't the best at defending traditional takedowns, I think she could end up getting some takedowns here the more traditional way. There were a couple times Like I said, the two that I can remember, she timed shots really well off her opponent, like jumping in, trying to exchange in the pocket, and she just timed and went under the shots real well and was able to get the takedown like that. I think if she could find those spots versus Edwards, she'll be able to get to the fight to the ground. Pudilova did it pretty well a couple times, and every time, again, when Pudilova pushed her up against the fence, Edwards was able to separate. So if Edwards is able to separate here, I like her to keep the fight long, able to outpoint her on the feet. Cornell's gas tank, she's still there in the third round, but you can tell midway through the second she starts to slow down. It's still, she can still go, but it's not like she's gonna die. But you can tell there's a drop off in volume, and maybe her strength's not the best at that point. But yeah, I really just think it depends on the way of which Nora comes about the takedowns. I think she'll go her more traditional style. I don't think she's gonna completely change up how she goes about it. And if she does, that would be impressive. And I think she could come out and get the win. But I'm going to go with Jocelyn Edwards to be able to fend off that clinch sometimes and keep the fight at range on the feet and get the points. Next up, Angelusa versus Rhys McKee. We've seen Rhys McKee in the UFC before. He had a really tough first go. He fought Khamzat Chimaev and Alex Morono and ran through in both. It was a pretty straightforward fight for both guys that got the win. And we've seen Angelusa. He looked better in his last fight. There's still something about him that doesn't grab me overall. I don't know what it is, but Lusa, 30 years old, 9-3, 5'10", 74-inch reach, 3-2 in his last 5. He has a loss on Contender Series, and he's 1-1 in the UFC. His last fight is that unanimous decision victory over AJ Fletcher in August of last year, so it's been a bit since he's fought. Not really too long. Just over a year. It's been a bit. Rhys McKee on the other side, 28 years old, 13-4-1, 6'2", 78-inch reach, 3-2 in his last 5, 0-2 in the UFC. Like I said, he had a short little stint a few years ago. And his last fight was a round 4 corner stoppage victory over Jimmy Wallhead for the Cage Warriors welterweight title. This is an interesting one because obviously on the feet, Rhys McKee is dangerous. He can make the fight grimy. He's huge for the weight class, super long. Obviously not his last one, but because I believe he fought Morono at 170, but his debut fight in the UFC was Khamzat Chimaev at 185, and he got ragdolled. But I think, to be honest, I don't really have too much to say about this fight. There are a couple fights on here I'm not super excited about. So I didn't really jump into them because I had no interest in the betting. But just off rip, how I feel about this fight, I'd say Angelusa is the more steady guy. He can slow down as well if it gets into the later rounds, but I just trust him to be the more steady fighter. He's not traditionally your guy that's going to go out and grapple. He didn't even shoot a takedown he didn't even get a takedown versus Munir Lazez. But, he'll go out there and shoot them. I think there's a possibility he's able to go out there and be steady on the feet, win minutes there. Obviously, Rhys McKee is going to be trying to get him out of there. And I think there will be spots where he can shoot takedowns, try and get this fight to the ground and hold position on top. I'm going to slightly favor Angelusa in this one. Like I said, I don't really have too much of an opinion on this one. I wasn't super excited for this one, but pick-wise, I'm just going to go with Angelusa here. I think, like I said, more steady and the possible grappling upside. This is an interesting one, though. We've got the return of Taylor Lapilus, who not a lot of people know, but you can see it right there. He's 3-1 in the UFC and didn't end up having more fights after that. He went off and boxed and then did MMA and some other promotions. He's the Aries champion right now, currently. That was his last fight. And then Cowlin Lauren, he is from bantamweight. He is explosive, exciting. He's got good boxing. I didn't even read the stats. I'm just going right into it. I'll do the stats first. Taylor Lapilus, 31 years old, 18-3, 5'6", 73-inch reach, 5-0 in his last 5, 3-1 in the UFC, like I said. But it's been some time since he's fought in the UFC. This is his return. His last fight was a round 1 KO TKO victory over Demarte Pena to win that Aries FC bantamweight belt. On the Cowlin I'm just gonna call him Kalen Lauren. He's 27 years old, 8-0, 5'6". I didn't see any reach stats. He's 5-0, obviously. In his last 5, he's undefeated. This is his UFC debut. His last fight was a round 2 KO TKO victory over Dylan Hazan for the Cage Warriors bantamweight belt. And like I was talking about, Lauren, good boxing. He's explosive. Not the biggest guy, so his boxing really takes place on the inside. And he's got great takedowns, good wrestling, good ground and pound for real. And on the Lapalus side, I like the veteran aspect of Taylor Lapalus. He's done it against some good guys. The competition that Lauren has fought up until his previous 3 fights has been sort of weak. His first 2 fights, everybody that's done a breakdown for this fight has brought it up, but his first 2 fights were against guys that didn't have wins. They're like 0-39 and 0-41 and are flagged on Tapology for being in fights that they possibly threw. And obviously at this point in his career, it doesn't really mean anything. He's still a good fighter, you can see it, but it's not like he's still fighting guys like that. It's just you can tell the level of competition hasn't really been there until recently, and still I would say the guys he's fought recently aren't the best. Lapalus, great striker. He throws good kicks. He does great body work. I love how Lapalus goes to the body and then he'll move it upwards to the head. Throws great combinations. He's got the kicks as well. And what I think is going to be the deciding factor in this fight is his takedown defense. Obviously, if Kalen can go out there and get the takedowns, I think there's a real nice path to victory for him where he can be on top. He can look for submissions. He can look for the ground and pound, which he is quite good at. But I do think if he does go down early, Lapalus should be able to get up. And just in general, Lapalus has great takedown defense. I really think, and it's not like Lauren's going to be a big, overpowering guy. They're around the same size. And I mean, there's always the chance he does go out there and get these takedowns, and he can overpower Lapalus. But just from the way, reading how I watch tape on each of these guys, I do think Lapalus will be able to stuff the takedowns. And then on the feet, at range, I think he'll be able to do well in the striking. Use the kicks to keep Lauren at range. Like I said, great body work, goes to the head well too. And on the feet, Lauren will be looking to get inside and make it dirty, which he could, and that's what we'll have to do on the feet to be able to win. But I just like Lapalus better. I think he's more clean, more experienced. I like the technique on the feet. I just think he'll be able to stuff takedowns and get it done on the feet. I've seen a lot of people taking Lapalus betting-wise. It's interesting. I'm just a little scared to take that bet. I do like the line is great, but there's sort of unknowns for Kalen that make me stay away from it because we haven't seen him against the best competition. And if he comes in and really does, he's able to just grind the takedowns and run through Lapalus with the takedowns. That could be really interesting for the future for Lauren. But yeah, it's just a spot with a lot of questions for me. But I do like Lapalus as the pick. Next up, another fight with 2 debuting guys. This one is pretty exciting. I'm really excited to see this one. We got Morgan Charrier versus Manolo Zacchini. Charrier, 27 years old, 18-9-1, 27 years old with that big of a record. Very experienced. He's fought some good guys. 5'7", no reach stats, 3-2 in his last 5, and this is his UFC debut. His last fight was a round 3 KO TKO over Diego Silva in last month. It was last month, almost a month ago exactly. But on the Zacchini side, 26 years old, 11-3, 5'8", no reach stats, 4-1 in his last 5, and this is also his UFC debut. His last fight was a round 2 KO TKO over Abu Tunkara in Venator FC, which I believe is where Martin Vettori came from, if I'm not mistaken, or at least he fought in Venator before. So this is an interesting fight to me because they are both good strikers in their own right. Manolo Zacchini has crazy power. He's quite aggressive. He can get caught being a little stagnant at times, but in general, he's a big power puncher. He swings wild, and super dangerous that way. Morgan Charrier is, I forgot to say it, but both of these guys throw really good leg kicks. I'm going to be interested to see that leg kick battle. I think Charrier checks kicks a bit better, not like he checks all of them, but just through watching tape, and I'd seen him fight before. I think he'll be able to win the leg kick battle just because of how he checks kicks a bit more. Zucchini just kind of affirms him. So I think two guys throwing leg kicks, if one of them's checking them, and they're both good at throwing leg kicks, the guy that's not checking will be off worse, obviously. And then Morgan Charrier, definitely the more patient striker, much more technical. He loves to counter-strike. And another guy that can get caught waiting and being stagnant at times. Definitely more of an issue for Charrier, I'd say. He's gone to decision 8 times, I think, and lost a decent amount of them. Those are most of his losses or decisions. So that can cause some issues, but this isn't a fight where I think that'll be an option. I think Zucchini probably comes forward trying to be aggressive in his UFC debut, with a French crowd against a Frenchman. I don't know. I don't think this fight will let there be guys just looking at each other, but I think Zucchini's going to come forward and throw big bombs, and if he can tag Charrier, I think he can have success. But I do think with how big he throws the hooks and how much power he puts into everything, I think Charrier, the much more technical striker, he's got great movement. I think he's going to be able to avoid the big shots, be able to counter-strike really well, and possibly find the finish. I think this is an interesting spot for a finish for Charrier because I think the wildness really opens it up for Charrier with his counter-striking. Zucchini's going to come in trying to find that finish, and just the technique and the movement from Charrier, I think he'll be able to dot him up, especially with the leg kicks. Zucchini's a guy who, how wild he is the longer this fight goes on. I think you could start to see questions on the cardio. I just don't know guys that swing like that early and try to carry it through the whole fight. They don't typically have the best cardio in the third round. So pick-wise, I'm going Charrier. Again, a spot where I've seen a lot of people pretty confident in picking Charrier. I'm a little more confident in Charrier in this one. I don't think Zucchini's quite to the level as Lauren, obviously. And I don't know, I just think the path to victory for Charrier is a bit easier. Obviously, unless he gets tagged. But I'm going Charrier as my pick. Next up, William Gomis, Yanis Gamori. I don't know. This isn't one that moves me. I'm not excited for this one. It's the last fight that Gomis was scheduled in. He was supposed to fight Lucas Almeida instead of Gamori, but things had to get moved around. I think that could have been an exciting fight because Lucas Gamori will be wild and swing big and bring the pressure, but I think Gamori, obviously, he'll be much more patient and more calculated. He's not as much of a wild man as Lucas Almeida. And Gomis, we know how good defensively he is. I want to say he's got it should say right here. Striking defense percentage, you can see it there. I always forget I have all the little stats up now, but 81% striking defense so far in the UFC. He's a hard guy to hit. His movement's great. He fights well at range because of his kicks. He's bouncy. He's got decent power in his hands. It's not like one-punch knockout power, but because of how many kicks he throws, you kind of don't expect the hands. And maybe it's not power. They come so quick that they're able to do some damage sometimes. But I do like how he does that. But I just think how he fights and Gamori being a bit more of a technical striker, a bit more patient, I think this can end up being a slower fight. It's a hard debut for Gamori as well. I think Gomis is going to be able to keep the range. It's going to be kind of the same story. He's going to be hard to hit. He's going to be able to kick well at range. And I just think he'll have slightly more volume than Gamori in this one. Tough first fight for a debuter. I liked the other fight better, Gamori versus Lauren and Gomis versus Almeida, but obviously Almeida had to pull out. I think it was a visa issue, but yeah. Not much to say on this one either. This is definitely one betting-wise I'll be staying away from. But the pick is Gomis. Next up, Volkan Ozdemir versus Bogdan Guskov. Ozdemir, 33 years old, 18-7, 6'2", 75-inch reach, 2-3 in his last five. His last fight was a unanimous decision loss versus Nikita Krylov in October of last year. That was a fight where they almost each finished each other, but somehow it ended up going to decision. Guskov, 30 years old, 14-2, also 6'2", no reach stats for him. He's 4-1 in his last five, and this is his UFC debut. His last fight was a round 1 KO TKO over Carlos Eduardo in March of this year. I'm going to keep this one simple and easy. I don't think Bogdan Guskov is that good. Obviously, he's got huge power in his hands and big guys with huge power, and Ozdemir's been knocked out. It can obviously happen, but Guskov, he fights absolute cans. He fights a lot of really old guys, and the one guy that he fought that kind of went out there, other than early in his career, but the one guy that went out there and kind of put a jab in his face and was a bit more technical, was able to get Guskov out of there in the first round. I just think Ozdemir is a tough first fight in the UFC for anybody, and obviously if he can go out there and clip Ozdemir, he could totally knock him out. Anybody at these big weight classes can do that, but I just think Guskov's a bit fraudulent. I think Ozdemir's going to go out there and just be better as a fighter, as a mixed martial artist in general, and win the fight. He could probably finish Guskov. I don't trust Guskov past the first round. I don't trust Guskov past the first 2 minutes. He seems to struggle with that. But, yeah, I think Ozdemir gets the finisher. This is another one where anything can happen. Guskov could find the big shot, but I just really think Ozdemir is a lot better, and he's going to be able to get this finish. The Ozdemir knockout is definitely something I'll probably play. Ozdemir first round as well, maybe. We'll see, though. I could be wrong. Guskov could go out there and clip him, but I just don't trust him. Next up, the fight I'm the most excited for, one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, Benoit Saint-Denis, taking on Thiago Moises. This is really Benoit's big chance to step up and really prove how good he is, because if he can beat Thiago Moises, I'd be surprised if he didn't get a title shot, or at least it was one fight, a title shot, an opportunity in the rankings, or if not straight a fight in the rankings, then at least one more and then a fight in the rankings. But he's getting real close. Benoit Saint-Denis, 27 years old, 11-1, 5'11", 73-inch reach, 4-1 in his last five, 3-1 in the UFC, only losing his debut. And his last fight was a round 1 submission over Ismail Bonfim last month. That was a great performance from Benoit Saint-Denis, and which a lot of people thought he was going to get steamrolled in. He was, I want to say, like a plus 355 underdog, and there were a couple guys, but I was definitely one of the only people backing Benoit, and I bet him in that fight. So that was a pretty cool call for me. I thought one of my better ones, definitely. Then Thiago Moises, 28 years old, 17-6, 5'9", 70.5-inch reach, 3-2 in his last five. His last fight, that's actually supposed to be a victory. I don't know why it says loss, but it was a round 2 submission victory over Melquizael Costa in January of this year. Tough debut fight for Melquizael Costa, but Moises was able to get that one done. Now, this is an interesting fight. I've seen a lot of people on both sides. It started out, Benoit, I believe, was an underdog, and there was a lot of early betting on Benoit Saint-Denis. And a lot of people still picking him. I'd say most people picking him and favoring him. But recently, as the weeks, we've gone deeper into the week, I'd say a few people have started to kind of more so pick Thiago Moises. Obviously, the majority is still with Saint-Denis, but the Moises backers are coming out the further into the week we go. I do think this is a tough fight for Moises. Benoit Saint-Denis is going to be the bigger, stronger guy in there. Obviously, we're going to give the pure BJJ advantage to Thiago Moises. His jiu-jitsu is one of the best in the UFC by far. But I think Benoit Saint-Denis can be competitive in the jiu-jitsu with him. I think with the size and strength, I think he will have the wrestling advantage as well. And then on the feet, he's got, I don't know, it's weird because they both strike differently. Maybe Thiago Moises is a little bit cleaner of a striker, but neither of them are like elite top tier strikers. But I do think the length and power and volume from Benoit could cause issues. Like I said, he's not the most technical striker, but he's tough as nails. It's hard to finish him on the feet. We saw that against Alessio. What's his name? Alessio Zaleski, Dos Santos Zaleski. I don't know. He's got the really long name. It was a real beating. Benoit Saint-Denis got beat pillar to post in that one from minute 1 of round 1 to minute 5 of round 3. It was brutal, but the dude could not get him out of there. It probably could have been stopped by the referee, but he was not going down. He was never getting knocked out. So the toughness is obviously there. I just don't see Moises finishing him on the feet. I don't think he has that big power, the power enough to do it. And like I said, the volume I think can cause Moises problems. The longer this fight goes, I think the wrestling will wear on Moises. I think how big and strong Denis will wear on Moises. I think the volume striking will wear on him. We know Moises can slow as the fight goes on. Benoit Saint-Denis has great cardio. Obviously, if Moises goes out there and Benoit makes a mistake on the ground and he puts himself in a bad position, Moises could 100% submit him. But I feel like that is his main path to victory. Other than that, I see Benoit being able to win a decision here, or maybe find a late TKO finish in the 3rd round. I mean, maybe he submits him. I find it hard to see Benoit submitting him unless it's like he's able to hurt him late in the 3rd and then he jumps on his back and finds a submission or something. But I think if they're exchanging on the ground, if there's some grappling exchanges where like Benoit takes him down or something and they're on the ground, I think it would be more so control time and trying to get off the ground and pound for Benoit. But yeah, I like the TKO finish late or the decision for Benoit. This is another one. I really think he gets this done, and you could have gotten better odds in the week. I always when I make these videos, I update the odds to what they are the day before, the day of, and then the Savage Rounds parlay is always the odds the day I release the video. So whoever else wants to jump on it can if they want to tail it. But you could have gotten Benoit at like, I want to say like minus 115, minus 120 earlier in the week. Even if you got him last week, he was like plus 100. But right now, I still think minus 155 is a solid price. I do think he gets this win. I really do. I think he's going to make a statement here and prove he's ready for the rankings. Next up, co-main event. Another one I'm really excited for. Manon Fiorot versus Rose Namajunas. I talked about it a little bit in the beginning. Rose making that jump up to 125 pounds. It's going to be really interesting because she's not the biggest girl. But we saw the pictures and videos and stuff. She's looking jacked. She filled out for sure. It'll be interesting to see how she fights with the weight on. Obviously, it's not like a huge jump in weight, so it's not going to affect her that much. But I don't know. It'll just be interesting to see how she deals with the bigger girls. Fiorot, 33 years old, 10-1, 5'7", 65-inch reach, 5-0 in her last 5. Her last victory was a unanimous decision, or her last fight was a unanimous decision victory over Caitlin Chukagian in October last year. Rose Namajunas, 31 years old, 12-5, 5'5", 65-inch reach as well. 3-2 in her last 5, and her last fight was that split decision loss to Carla Esparza in May of last year, so she really hasn't fought in quite some time. If you don't remember that fight, it's because your brain blocked it out for good reason. It's probably up there with Derek Lewis and Ngannou for the worst fight in UFC history. It probably overtakes it. But I'm excited to see Rose back. I've always been a big Rose fan. And as Fiorot has come into the UFC, she's made me a fan each time she's fought. I just love the way she fights. She's aggressive. She uses her size. She's physical. Big punching power. I like her a lot. And this is a fight where I think that's gonna play a big effect. It's hard to break Rose down because I think a lot of her game comes down to her mental. If she is feeling good, feeling her best, if she's in that mindset where she's walking around, I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best, where she's saying that to herself, I think that's when she's in her best spot. And when she's like that, she's hard to beat. Her striking's incredible, her movement's incredible, her jiu-jitsu on the ground is incredible. And that's why it's hard to judge her, because you don't know. Obviously, I'd say leading up in the media and stuff, she seems like her mental's on the right side. So that's good. That'll hopefully help make this fight competitive. But what I see being an issue with her is the moving up. I think Fiorot is going to be much more physically strong than her, especially come fight night. And I think the pressure from Fiorot, the amount she throws, the relentlessness, the cardio, I think it's going to be an issue for Rose. She hasn't really fought anybody that's come at her to that extent. Obviously, Joanna comes forward at you too, like a wild woman, but I think the size and strength of Fiorot will make it a little bit different, and Fiorot comes forward with a little bit more, like, reckless abandonment. It's obviously she's a good striker and she's technical, but sometimes when she comes forward, she's just trying to get you out of there, and it's wild. But for the most part, she's a great striker. And then the physicality and the strength, like I said, I think if she wants to, which you can see, she's shooting minimum a takedown per 15 minutes. I think if she goes out there and finds a takedown in the first round, that could be the way she ends up going for the rest of the fight. I do think on the feet she can outdo Rose just because she's going to be bigger and more powerful, and those shots are going to impact her more in the volume. I just love the volume at which Manon fights with. And if she goes out there, I think she's going to be able to use those strikes to get in close and find the takedowns if she chooses to go that route. And with the size and strength, I think she really can cause problems for Rose in that area. I think she'll be able to get her down to the ground and lay on top of her. I don't think she's going to go out there and submit Rose. I really have a hard time seeing that. I don't even know. Let me see. Hold up. Yeah, she has 0 submissions on her record. So if she does go out there and it's on the ground, it's going to be more so position. She's going to be holding for time, and I think she'll go out there. Obviously, she'll try and find that ground and pound, but Rose is dangerous on the ground. I think she can make it awkward, but I think Fiorot wins a decision here. It's going to be hard for Rose to get her game off. She's going to want to counter-strike, but I just think the volume and pressure and size, I really just keep coming back to the size and strength. It's going to make a lot of things difficult for Rose. This is another spot I really like, minus 175 at the moment. It is coming down, so maybe wait till Friday if you're going to bet Manon, just because she was like minus 210 not too long ago, and it's just, I'd say these past couple of days, the Rose train has started to pick up with how she is talking in interviews and stuff, but I really just think the size and strength is going to be the big issue. I'm going with Fiorot in this one. And then we get to the main event of the evening, Ciryl Gane versus Serghei Spivac. This is an interesting one. This one probably took me the longest to come, maybe not the longest. It was one of the more interesting ones for me to think about, I'd say. Ciryl Gane, 33 years old, 11-2, 6'4", 81-inch reach, 3-2 in his last 5. His last fight being that title fight against Jon Jones, where he was submitted in round 1. Jon Jones walked him down, took him down, and it was over. Really nothing in that fight for Jon Jones. And then on the Spivac side, he's 28 years old, 16-3, 6'3", 78-inch reach, 4-1 in his last 5. And his last fight was a round 1 submission victory over Derek Lewis, and that was in February of this year. Everybody that's on Spivac is banking that he's going to be able to go out there and get a hold of Gane and drag him down, because his takedown defense has not looked good in his past 2 fights. And that was kind of my thinking before I had put any thought into it and sat down and went back and watched a bit of tape for this one. That was kind of my thinking. I was like, I think Spivac is probably going to go out there and push him up against the cage and find the takedowns and drag him down. But when I sat down to think about it and watch tape and stuff, the only 2 people that have taken, or the 2 people in the last fight that have exposed Gane for the takedown defense, or the lack of takedown defense ability, is Jon Jones, the greatest man to ever step into a fighting facility, whether it be a ring, an octagon, whatever. He's the greatest of all time. And Francis Ngannou, who is probably one of the strongest people to ever step into the octagon, the most physically imposing people to step into the octagon. And so those 2 guys went out there and get takedowns. Spivac is, in my opinion, not cut from not even close, cut from that cloth that guys like Jon Jones and Francis are cut from. I think he's nowhere near on just the fighting level of those 2 guys. And I think Gane is even a level above Spivac. On the feet, there is no competition whatsoever here. We've seen Spivac get knocked out. Guys that come forward tend to cause him issues. Um, I see Spivac having a really, really hard time trying to get a hold of Gane. I think the range, he's going to use a lot of kicks. I think the jab is going to be a really big weapon for him. The teep kick is going to be great. And I think he's going to keep a lot of range. And we all know, movement-wise, Gane is the best heavyweight that's ever been in the octagon. Strictly on how he moves, and I mean, some people say he's the best heavyweight striker ever. I'm not speaking on that, but I'm talking purely about movement and athleticism. He's one of the best ever in the UFC. And Spivac is not on that level athletically. I think it's going to be hard for Spivac to find Gane, whether it's because Gane's keeping range with the jab, with those poking teep kicks, with the leg kicks, or whether it's he's in and out, side to side. You just can't get a hold of him. I think he's kind of, obviously not the same fight whatsoever, but kind of how I talked about Aljo. I just think, I mean, the range, it's the range and the movement. That's going to cause problems for these guys that need a takedown. So if it's a good striker versus a guy that's going to go out and get a takedown, a lot of the time you'll go out and pick the grappler. That helps a lot. But when it's a good striker with elite movement and elite range against a guy that needs a takedown, it tends to cause the grappler way, way more problems. And I see that playing out in this fight. I don't think Spivac's going to be able to get the takedowns he needs. And then on the feet, I think Gane will piece him up and finish him. If it is going, regardless, whichever way this fight goes, I do not see it going the distance at all. If Spivac's able to get a hold of him, which I don't think he is, but if he is able to, I have a hard time seeing Gane surviving on the ground for 5 rounds. But if what I think is going to happen, Spivac's not able to get a hold of him, I would be maybe the most surprised I've ever been if Spivac is able to last 5 rounds striking with Ciryl Gane. I see Gane getting him out of there inside 4, maybe inside 3, to be honest. Maybe even sooner. I mean, once Spivac knows he can't get the fight to the ground, what is he going to do? I really don't see any path to victory other than the takedowns for him. I think Gane stuffs him. I think it's a wrap. I think Gane finishes him. But yeah, that's all the fights we have. I'm going to start doing this. I'll just read off the people I've picked. So we're going Cavalcanti, Basharat, Edwards, Angelusa, Taylor Lopoulos, Morgan Charrier, William Gomes, Falcon Ozdemir, Benoit Saint Denis, Manon Fiorot, and Ciryl Gane. And now we've got the Savage Rounds parlay. We hit last week again. We're catching up to that 5-win streak, the 5-week win streak. We're on 3 now. Takes us record-wise to 14-10 with a profit of 5.98, almost 6 units. So if it's just the format is if you've put 1 unit on it each week, this is where you'd be. We started off a bit rough in the beginning, but about halfway through the year, it's really picked up. I mean, if you started tailing halfway through the year, you're definitely more than 6 units profit because you missed out on most of the 10 misses early on. But this week we're going Farid Basharat. Like I said, I think he's the much more technical striker. I think he's going to be able to counter really well. I think he's going to be able to kick that front leg of Clayton Rodriguez. I think the takedowns are there if he wants. I really like Basharat in this spot. I think he goes out there and finds a decision victory. And Benoit Saint Denis, like I said, he's going to be bigger, stronger, have the wrestling advantage, and maybe not the technique advantage on the feet, but I just love the volume and power he brings. I think it's going to be really hard for Thiago Moises to implement really what he wants to do, unless he's able to get out there and find a submission on the ground versus Benoit Saint Denis, which is totally possible with how good he is. I have a hard time seeing Thiago getting into this fight. I think Benoit gets it done by late finish or decision. If you parlay these two guys, you get it at plus 112. If we hit that, that'll bring us up to over 7 units profited if we hit this, which I really do think we will. But that's all. UFC Paris. I do have one video coming out tomorrow as well. It's going to be the Contender Series video. Just talking about how this week's Contender Series went and making matchups. That'll be Friday. But yeah, see you guys Friday, and then next week for the recap. Peace out.